Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third episode of our weekly podcast, Just Politics, Our World View, where we discuss politics in Barbados, the region, and the rest of the world. Remember that you can find us here live every Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. When you join the program, please share so that others can also join and you can do your part to increase our viewership. I am your host, Ayo Olalara, and this is my co-host, Dr. Terry Harris. Good evening, Terry.
Good evening, Ayo. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. So this week we have two guests. First, Dr. George Brathwaite, who is a political scientist. He's currently a part-time lecturer at the University of West Indies Cape campus and a course coordinator and instructor at the University of the West Indies Open Campus. Good evening and welcome to the show, Dr. Brathwaite. Have you muted yourself?
Yes, good evening. Good evening. How are you doing?
Hi.
How are you doing? Terry and Ayo and Devaron. Good evening to your guests as well.
Good evening, George.
Good evening.
All right, so also this week we have political analyst Devaron Bruce. Devaron is a senior member, researcher, and writer for Integrity Group Barbados. He frequently writes for the Barbados Today column, Millennium Voices. He's also an MPhil student at University of West Indies Cape campus, where he has also taught part-time. Good evening and welcome to the show, Devaron.
Hey, good evening, Terry, Ayo, George, and good evening to the audience. Pleasure being here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right, so this week's topic is Race Heats Up, and it is brought to you by Thinking Analytics, developers of data models and data visualizations. And now we go into the weekly roundup with Ayo. Ayo?
Thank you, Terry. And in the weekly roundup, this week was another interesting one for politics. In Barbados, the by-election campaign in St. George North continues. The debates were not called off, even though the Democratic Labour Party and the United Progressive Party and the People's Party for Democracy and Development all decided that their candidates would not participate. Emmanuel Joseph, the president of the Barbados Association of Journalists and Media Workers, the organization staging the debates, has blamed Prime Minister Motley's announcement of the debates for the other candidates' decision to withdraw. Joseph suggested that going forward, political leaders refrain from making such pronouncements so that the process may be seen to be independent of political interference. I'm inclined to agree since perception is 9/10 of the truth. A significantly scaled down format took place on Thursday, the 29th of October, with candidates from the Bajan Free Party, Solutions Barbados, and the Barbados Labour Party. I think it is fair to say that the winner of the debate was the Barbados Labour Party's candidate, Tony Moore, and I guess that's as expected. I don't think, however, that any of us was prepared for Alex Mitchell of the Bajan Free Party. Apparently, he owns all the land in Barbados, and we are all just really squatters. I was waiting for him to declare that he can see Russia from his house.
Come on, stop it now.
And in case you don't know, Granville Phillips II is an engineer.
You don't say.
I do say. He said.
Well, he said.
Over and over.
Yeah.
The Barbados Labour Party's candidate, Tony Moore, was significantly more subdued than the other two participants. A bit too subdued if you ask me, but at least she managed to sound informed, articulate, and normal despite being flanked by a circus. Here are some of the best memes from the night. I will build a wall.
I am an engineer, and the land is
mine.
Yeah. Only a great threesome.
I find these way too funny. I'm sorry. Next one, Terry. Roses are red, Nelson is blue. I'm an engineer. I thought you did knew. All right, let's Carney, but it's funny to me.
You made this one?
No, I didn't actually. I am not a meme maker. I'm sorry.
Oh, this one.
I wish I knew what Groot's voice sounded like, so I can say that in his voice, but I can't. But I am Groot.
I am Groot.
I am an engineer. Oh Lord. Anyways, you guys get serious. As government continues its fight against the state of gun violence terrorizing the island, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers in Cincinnati discovered that a shipment labeled as auto parts bound for an individual in Barbados was actually 3 handguns and their magazines. Remember when we used to use big rocks to settle differences? Good times, right?
Yep.
Barbados' Attorney General Dale Marshall reminded residents this week that crime is a societal problem and we all have a part to play in its eradication. He again reiterated residents' responsibility to inform the police of criminal activity in their communities. And I agree, you know. But unless we can do that anonymously, well, you know, what they say, snitches get stitches and something like that.
I don't know.
Later this evening, the Barbados Labour Party will host what I am certain will be the first all-woman lineup political platform in Barbados. Let me just punch it here a little bit, okay? And I think it may be the first anyway in the world, so I say well done. Well done. The government of Barbados will receive a further $90 million US dollars, that is, in funding from the IMF. The International Monetary Fund reportedly approves of the government's economic reform program thus far. The extended fund facility will also be topped up with some 66 million US dollars. Let's hope that turns into good news also for the average man and woman on the street. And further abroad, leading up to the US presidential election, the main concern for analysts right now is, how is Trump going to steal this one? And in the United Kingdom, Jeremy Corbyn has been suspended from the Labour Party for calling out anti-Semitism. Corbyn stated that those who deny that there is anti-Semitism in the Labour Party were wrong, but that the problem is often overstated for political reasons. Now, all of that may be true, but I'm more impressed that that was enough for a suspension, and grabbing women by the hoo-ha isn't. But I know, different nations and all that, but it's amazing. But here ends...
In trouble.
What's that?
Speaking the truth often gets you in trouble.
Yeah. And here ends the weekly roundup. Viewers, please note that you also have the opportunity to ask questions and to contribute to the program with your comments. As usual, simply type them in the comment section below, WhatsApp us on 833-9886, or email us at jpourworldview@gmail.com. And please keep sharing this live, liking our page. We are attempting to grow as organically as possible, and we therefore appreciate your help and your support. Thank you guys for being here. And now we move into the main program, and we'll be mainly with the topic, the race heat up. Gentlemen, as we all know by now, the debate leading up to the St. George North by-election took place on Thursday evening. And it was a lot of things, mainly entertaining. We saw a composed but articulate Barbados Labour Party candidate, Tony Moore, basically being the most reasonable voice on the platform. And I think that she could have been more assertive, I believe, in outlining her plans for the constituency. She preferred instead to refer to the government's overall developmental plans and policies. And I suppose that being the candidate for the sitting government, that this may make sense, but I would have loved to hear her more on her own personal plans in some instances. What it is that she herself would be aiming to do in the constituency. I've been following the campaign pretty closely. I think some of you know that. I've been attending the public meetings and so forth to get, you know, to hear for myself what's going on there. And she seems to have a firm grasp of the issues. I just think that she missed a couple of opportunities on Thursday night to expand on those further. And in my opinion really, she turned out to be the overall winner of the night, and definitely by leaps and bounds. Granville, on the other hand, totally enjoyed himself in the spotlight, and he spent most of his time basically telling the public of his professional qualifications, mainly the fact that he's an engineer, a fact that we are all aware. We were aware. If we weren't aware, we are aware now. He did give some insight into his plan for a nonprofit construction company, though, and to train constituents to build their own businesses without capital. Now, the flaws in Granville's plan for me is that not everyone can work in construction. I actually own a construction company, and an unskilled worker unaccustomed to the rigors of the job can actually end up costing a contract some serious money. To attempt to do that with a large number of unskilled workers, I think that that would increase the supervisory needs of the project and therefore the cost. So he would the idea of a non-profit construction company, you know, it's a little bit strange, but maybe he has the answers and he didn't explain it very well on Thursday night. And secondly, not everyone can own an online business either, because that calls for training, that calls for equipment, business acumen, and most of all, it calls for interest. I think that Granville is selling clouds with his plans, and I don't think he has quite thought through those recommendations. Surely there are people in St. George North that could benefit from these plans. However, I am not certain that they will be at the scale that Phillips seems to be recommending, and therefore the recommendations remain quite narrow, in my opinion. The third candidate from the Baja Free Party, was a total disaster. But it raises a critical question, which I hope that we can spend some time on later. The question of who should be able to run for government. Should our laws be adjusted somewhat in this regard? Should a psychiatric evaluation be made mandatory? Certainly the display put on by the candidate for the Baja Free Party should raise some concerns for all and sundry of the relative ease with which people can become candidates. Granted, were he to attempt to join one of the mass parties, he would never have made it to a single podium, at least we hope. But I also ask that you cast your minds back to the last general election, where a similar character was also a candidate for another third party. So I ask again, should there be changes to the vetting process for persons joining or starting political party? But is there even a vetting process right now? I think that I'm not even sure of that, even in asking that. Anyway, so overall, with regards to debates, however, they were good entertainment, even if not as informative in terms of policy plans and so forth. They were informative from the perspective that we got a chance to see who the candidates were, what they offer, and who they are as individuals. And I think that that's worth quite a bit. I would love to know if polls were done and to show how and if they had any influence on the voters. In the United States, debates tend to move the polls very little. So I would love to know their effect in this environment. And going forward, when we have debates, I think that polls should, if we have debates, I think that polls should definitely become the norm. So should the debate become a mainstay in our democratic process? I say yes, emphatically so. I don't want to judge the debates in general based on what happened on the first one. And I will pose this question to you, our guests, in a minute, so that you can think about it a little bit. I personally think that they have promise, and that they give the people who wouldn't generally attend public meetings a chance to see their potential leaders in action and to hear their views on the issues that affect them. The political parties, as I said before, should definitely start planning them. And I also think that Barjam is the perfect organization to take charge of their planning. And so, as promised, I want to ask both of you, pose the first question to you, our guests. I want you both to answer the same question. Do you think that the debates are a good addition to our democratic process, and why?
So I guess
you want me to go first, Deb?
You want to go first, Dr. Brathwaite?
I pass off to Devaron.
Okay, you go first, Devaron.
Are debates a good addition to our political process? Personally, I would not object to adding them to the political process, but I think we need to put some context into the reasoning behind a debate. So when you look at larger jurisdictions like the US, throughout Europe, even Latin America and Jamaica in particular as well, there is a concern regarding time and size. When you're dealing with large jurisdictions, there is an inability of candidates and the leading candidates in particular to traverse constituencies and get to every nook and cranny. So the purpose of the debate is really to provide an additional avenue for persons to have some level of access and information to candidates. So on that basis, I am not particularly sure that debating made much sense within the St. George North context, given the size and given the reality that by the end of the election, or just before the election, most candidates probably would have seen every house in St. George North at least 10 times. So we don't have the concern regarding time or space. But I would say, as you alluded to, there are going to be individuals who would not normally participate in the political process in the sense that they will not go to spot meetings, they may not be at home when someone is canvassing and what's not. So it does give some avenue for greater information and greater access. But I don't think that culturally it is something that is a make or break within our political context. So we'll start right there.
Okay. What would you say, Dr. Brathwaite?
Okay, I share perhaps a slightly a different perspective. I start off with the opinion that debates ought to be something wholesome, and you are doing a little bit more to engage the population or to have them to be visual in terms of your presence. But more fundamental, we are largely a pretty much a African society, you know, despite the majority of African ancestry, which has had a very strong oral tradition. I think perhaps you can say that being able to utilize debates, being able to bring good or effective speech, however you define that, to the people, and so that they could judge you not in terms only in terms of the veracity of what you're saying in terms of your arguments and your credibility, but also they can detect hints towards your sincerity in wanting to be a people's representative. I think those are all important things that can emerge in the context of a debate. Now, I totally agree that, and I thought it would have been problematic from the time I heard that it was the Prime Minister that announced the debates. I thought it was going to be problematic. I thought, here is a good idea, and it is going to naturally attract lots of opposition. One, because at this point in time, if you're not rooted within the bosom of the Barbados Labour Party, everybody else in Barbados tends to be oppositional. And if the Democratic Labour Party was in power, that would have been the same way. We have that dynamic in terms of a two-party system. So the other reality emerging from that is that perhaps, given the environment in terms of where COVID is flowing, I thought perhaps it should have been a suggestion, and that to suggest that the Barbados Labour Party, the ruling, the government would have assisted and facilitated, one, getting an independent body, and two, putting some resources behind to make sure it comes off. And I think that is the extent to which government should have involved itself, particularly as I suggested, there is a sense in the population that that all roads lead in one direction, and when you get that, you can scratch the surface, and you will get some dust, and I think we saw the dust, and that is why I think some of the opposition parties backed away,
right,
whether it was good or not.
So concerning, I guess, the follow-up on this question as to whether we should have had the debate or not, this is a question to, I guess, you both. So given everything that yourself, Dr. Brathwaite, and Devaron said, was it necessary to have the debate at a constituency level? Because, okay, so we may be more open to having debates at a national level, but is having a constituency level debate, is that really necessary? Because what do we expect to happen next time?
I think when you consider if you consider from the perspective of the Barbados Labour Party, I think a majority of persons felt that Tony Moore had a distinct advantage, seeing that her stage is a stage for talking, period. Right. As General Secretary of the Barbados Labour Party, as a trade union rep, as a member sitting at the head table of the tripartite arrangements, she has to speak more or less bread and butter for the bread and butter of the people that she leads. However, I think what could have happened had it come from an independent source in terms of, it would have given persons like Floyd Reefer some visibility. Right. Whether, however you define good speech, the people would have been allowed to make that differentiation or that discernment. But right. The reality is it would have allowed them some visibility. So I think that may have been a ball drop. On the other hand, we saw Solutions Barbados take full advantage of the visibility. And whether his promises may appear highfalutin, there's a class of Barbadians that he was directly speaking to, and it's a class of Barbadians that are thoroughly affected now with how things have been going. That high unemployment group among youth who really and truly looking for a dollar to claim some form of independence. And it is to those types of people, and them say, I am no carpenter, I don't want to be in this for too long, but at least I can go and make a buck and spend my $1, put a little food on the table, have a drink with the boys. So there are dynamics. There are dynamics at play that could have worked to the advantage of being part of it. I was disappointed, I must say, with the PDP. Again, the PDP has been slow in organizing various forums to have their message and to demonstrate that really and truly they are about democracy and there are about people participation in these types of things. And it is from that standpoint that I became a little bit, I wondered the fact that the 2 years have passed and they're yet to have branches in particular constituencies and stuff, and they're really yet to utilize the full utility that comes with social media. I'm wondering if they did not shortchange themselves in backing away, notwithstanding source of the announcement of the debates.
Okay, Devaron, same question. So, should we have had the debate at a constituency level? Is that parochial? Would it not be better to have the debate at a national level? What were your views there?
Well, I'm curious as to how much you can discern from the genuineness of a candidate, the quality of a candidate, and everything else from an hour and 20 minutes on your stage. If you have a circumstance where candidates have 6 weeks to campaign, they have multiple options of meeting people, multiple options of showing their strengths, multiple options of engagement and the same democracy that we mentioned of. Comparatively, an hour and 20 minutes on a scripted stage, you cannot learn very much or you do not gain very much as an individual from that circumstance. Culturally, again, Barbados is not, well, historically rather, we've not had a debate in Barbados, I believe, either between 1999 and 2003 being the last. And we've had multiple elections since then. So the idea that Barbadian psyche is all of a sudden in a position where they must have a debate to discern the genuineness of a candidate and the quality of a candidate is nonsense, because we've had multiple elections in the absence of debates. So they do not reflect our cultural circumstance. And quite frankly, I don't think that they're a determination on whether somebody would vote B, D, UPP, or whatever. Quite frankly, to me, they're a waste of time.
So you don't think debates are necessary at any level, given our historical, cultural dynamic in Barbados? We don't have a culture of debates. Fair enough. All right, so
I would say they're useful, particularly maybe at the national level where you may have a prime minister and opposition debating national issues. But at the constituency level, I do not think that it was necessary.
Fair enough. Yeah,
I may be the only person here who Go ahead. Go ahead, George. You have the floor.
Dr. Brathwaite?
Yeah, I would like to respond. I do not mind the I like the toughness of language, so I'm not worried. What to suggest that you cannot make any type of discernment, I think can be misleading, particularly if we understand social psychology and the dynamics of a political platform. You actually will hear less issues being discussed on the actual political platform than you will hear in a properly moderated debate. Reason being, it is the fanfare and the saying the little silly things that gets the stage going. You know, so but when a person has to respond to you and they know that, well, look, I'm looking into your eyes now on TV. I'm listening to your words. I'm listening for the mistakes, and I'm looking to see if you really can represent me. I think that from a social psychological perspective, that does have an impact on the individual. And this is whether at the national or the parochial. I think it leads into what I thought was clearly the biggest error on the night of the debate. And that was the moderation and the opening question. I thought it was a wrong choice for an opening question. You had to get those candidates something short, and get the candidates speaking to the parochial issues. But it was more or less open in such a general, broad, and even when the question was repeated, it changed. It changed. So I think when you look at those things, if you have a properly moderated, as you guys are doing here, and you have a properly moderated session debate, I think you can lead and you can draw from the participants. But it is those things that will affect, hinder, help, or whatever the persons in who are the constituents, who are your audience. Toni Moore understood quite well that her audience, although she spoke in some terms to general things, she also understood, and I think to a lesser extent, Mr. Phillips understood that his audience was really, and the people of St. George North. And as I suggested earlier, a few minutes ago, that is why Phillips tended to go to that group that is underemployed or unemployed and who can use their hands at this tough time to make a dollar. Well, Toni was resonated the fact, hey, I have been visible, you know, I'm not as new to this thing as you think. I've been in St. George. So they managed to get into those types of things. And I think those are the types of ways that you can shape and reshape the discussion to meet parochial needs. But too many of the questions were left too broad to deal with national issues. Notwithstanding, there's COVID, there's the unemployment, there's the presence of the IMF, there's a shortage of money in people's pocket and all these other matters.
Well, I guess to defend the moderator a little bit, it was a nationally televised debate. So you would find, I guess this is the problem that I guess I am having with regards to the idea that you would want to broadcast at a national level, a constituency level debate. But that is done. The debates are being had, and we get the difference in views.
Fair point.
Go ahead, Ayo. I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I like the idea of debates personally. I like that, but I do take Devaron's point on the efficacy in terms of swaying the poll, and this is why I would really like to see polls being done before and after, because just before they don't move the polls in the US, it doesn't mean that they don't move the polls here. I mean, before what's his name? My guy, the character. Mitchell. Before
right.
Mitchell spoke, we had no idea who he was.
That's true.
And and a campaign was happening in St. George North, and he was one of the candidates on the ballot.
Yeah.
Do you understand where I'm coming from? So we could have placed our vote for Mitchell. Those of you who live in St. George now could have been placing your vote for Mitchell, thinking, you know what, I need a change. I'm just gonna waste my vote somebody else, whatever. And I know we always say that a third party isn't gonna get in, blah blah blah. And I'll get to that a little later on one of the questions, but we still have to be careful. So I like the idea of the debate for that reason, if nothing else. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
Also, when we go to the platforms, like as George was saying earlier, we get a lot of pandering to the base. That's what we get on platforms. When people come to our house, we tell them our personal problems. I've lived in a constituency where I've never seen a candidate.
Are you at home?
Do you understand? Huh? At my home.
You spend a lot of time at home.
So that's the point. Whether I'm at home or not, I work from at home. I've never seen a candidate come to my gate and say to me, what are your issues? This is what I'm going to do in your constituency. I've never had that experience in my constituency.
Right.
Therefore, for somebody like me, I don't need you to come to my gate. Well, right now I got a problem with flooding, so let's see my representative. But other than that, I don't need you to come to my gate. But I want to hear what it is that you are going to do in my constituency. For somebody like me, debates work. Do you understand the point I'm coming from?
Yeah, I take your point, and I take George's point as well, Dr. Brathwaite's point as well, for the utility of the debate. I guess, like I said, the difficulty I have with it is, whether these issues are really relevant for the nation.
Yeah, and I agree with that. There's some wiggle room there for me in terms of who debates. Obviously, if we're taking it from the US, it's going to be the leaders, right? I actually don't mind us straying from the norm and allowing debates to happen in the constituency, because we don't have to copy it verbatim. But that's just me. But yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
The interesting thing is that this is an anomaly. By-elections are not a standard practice in our system. So when there are going to be elections, 9 out of 10 times they're going to be national elections. So I'm questioning now stylistically how we would actually have constituency debates in a national election. It could certainly be done. But back to a point George made, one of the best moderated debate stages and best organized debate stages and most prominent debate stages in Barbados is the Parliament of Barbados. Now ask yourself, how many persons actually watch Parliament on a daily basis? If Barbadians were genuinely interested in these issues that George is trying to tell us that, they're all interested in the vote, we can discern all these things, why are they not following our Parliament? We can check various media outlets on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock and see the double digits and single digit persons watching Parliament. This is the best debated stage in the country, but yet somehow persons are interested in discerning the views and the individual candidates and everything else in this. No, it is pure entertainment. And I think that is how it has been viewed. I don't think anybody can tell us any policy initiative that came out of Tony Moore's mouth, any policy initiative that came out of Robin Phillips' mouth, and persons that you and I and persons on this panel, we may be able to, but we follow politics a lot more closely than average individuals. Nobody remembered anything of any substance from the debate. So pray tell me, what exactly are we gaining substantively from engaging in that sort of activity? I don't see it.
I like to give Pages, and then you answer. I just like to give Pages a little bit more credit. But you go ahead, George.
Because I'm not going to speak for everyone in Barbados, but what I do know is there were times in the post-independent history when debates in Parliament were keenly followed. It also gives credence to a statement made during the so-called period of the last decade, and I'm wondering how much did we actually lose when our Parliament was labeled a Poraki Parliament. I think there is some merit in the statement, because not only did we see a significant fall off in terms of persons who would attend Parliament and the quality of debates, but we also saw a decline in the value of a number of the comments emerging from those debates. So there are some persons in Barbados, many persons in Barbados, I would argue, who don't remember many things unless it were the things that hurt their pockets or the taxes, that they remembered positive things during that period. However, and let's be serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
Parliament is the place that has to, I would say, be rekindled. That's where you're going to hear all your policy measures. I didn't listen to the debate or listen to the repeat or parts of it on Thursday night to determine who's going to make what policy and who's going to make what policy. That is something that is going to be done internally in terms of the various parliamentary groups and the shadow cabinets and all types of things. What I was really listening for, the issues, the real issues, and how do these competitors in that political race speak to, want to address, and do I think, are they speaking with the type of conviction that they can impress any of their leaders or any of their followers in relation to matching the people's expectations with what the actual problems are? That is what I was listening for. I wasn't listening for a policy framework. If I want to listen to a policy framework, I would listen to the leader of the opposition and I would listen to the government of Barbados. And if you really want to get a little neater on that, I would prefer to listen to what is actually emerging, coming out of the Senate, than what is actually coming out in terms of the lower house.
Fair point.
All right, so let me just read a question and a comment from the audience. Because, you know, we like to be as interactive as possible with the program. So Sean Knight is saying that he thinks the idea of debates are good, but he thinks that there should be qualification requirements for participating in the debate. In the US, there were minimum qualifications before candidates could get on the debate stage. And you guys know that I actually agree with him. What do you guys think on that? I'm gonna ask another question before you answer that. So, this is Sean Knight again. He has a question. I heard Floyd Reefer say that if he is elected, he will become the opposition leader. How does that work? Is there a case for him displacing Joe Adderley as opposition leader? And just one more before we go. Just one more before we go on. The Marie Holder is asking, the more important question is, why proceed with a debate that was already shrouded in controversy? There were telltale signs that the debate should have been cancelled, and therefore a debate with the withdrawal of key political candidates going, well, I think she means was going to be a huge gamble to try to salvage. The debate was not necessary at all. And of course, I disagree, but
okay, so I guess
in this instance, I can agree with Ms. Holder, in that not only did you have the party that is now supposedly represented in Parliament withdrawing, but you had two other parties, the major political one of the major political parties, and the one who was seen as perhaps that third party. Once those emerged and followed importantly by two persons who I think Barbados see as top class journalists, moderators, interviewers, I think that took the shine off the ball, and I do not think you could have got good enough swing bowling, particularly if you had a batsman like Floyd Reefer out.
Okay, what about the other questions that were asked? Devaron, you wanna attempt that one there about the qualification? Not that one.
Right.
About Floyd Reefer becoming the opposition leader.
Well, that is actually a very interesting. I should start by saying I should leave that to the lawyers, but that is actually a very interesting consideration that we must make, because the Constitution of Barbados says the person that has essentially the second highest majority in the parliament party-wise is the opposition leader. So what happens when there are two individuals that come in and then they're of two separate parties?
And
We've never had,
yeah.
we've never had that before. I think logic may very well dictate that first come, first serve. I don't know. There's already an opposition leader. But it is something that has to be explored.
Governor General, who is, I think, will make that determination if it comes to comes to a head, I think. What do you want to say, George? Because you may know more.
Yeah, I think Devaron, my interpretation of what Devaron said, I'm not in sync with him. Two things. As far as I remember, as far as I recall, the laws of Barbados said it is that person who commands the majority support. So it doesn't speak to any other issue about most votes or anything like that. I think the Prime Minister threw a spanner in the works when she alluded to the fact that in the last general election, the Democratic Labour Party would have had 30,000 more votes than what the PDP received. And I think that may make a valid claim or a valid push by Floyd. However, and this is the other however, it was between the period, I think it was 1990 to 2003. The Democratic Labour Party had David Thompson and Dennis Elman in the House of Assembly. And David Thompson was supposed to be the party president. He was supposed to be the leader of the opposition. And Dennis Kelman actually withdrew his support, and he argued, he contended seriously that he should have been the leader of the opposition. And there was a bit of struggle which continued throughout the tenure of that term. So there, in a sense, there is some precedent in the final statement you made in that the person that was there first perhaps is more likely to maintain, because the Governor General exercising good prudence may not want to upset an apple cart. But the reality is, I remember the bitterness that was publicly exposed between those two DLP candidates between that period 1999 and 2003. And they both wanted to be opposition leader, but one was already installed. And they didn't support each other. So I guess it throws up some questions.
Yeah.
But I think the Prime Minister has perhaps thrown the gauntlet down. The Democratic Labour Party got 33,000 votes plus, and the PDP, which, as you know, there is still some uncertainty as to whether the PDP right now can even draw what it expects in terms of money that would normally go to political parties. So there is some disjuncture there.
Yeah. I think the Prime Minister might be quite right, as usual. She's usually right about a lot of things on this point, because I mean, you have to ask yourself, of course, we are not in the mind of the Governor General. We don't know what she would decide if this hypothetical would come to fruition. I don't think it will happen, but we'll get to that later. But if you know, it were to happen that somehow Mr. Reefer makes his way into the House of Assembly and the Prime Minister and the Governor General has to decide, I guess we can ask ourselves one question: which party, PDP or Democratic Party, is the opposition in Barbados? And I don't think you can come down on any other side other than to say the Democratic Party is the opposition in Barbados.
Interestingly enough, we have to think back to the 80s, George, and I think you know what I will make mention of when the NDP broke off of the Democratic Labour Party and became the opposition. So we can't make the argument that naturally the second most popular party in a country naturally should be in opposition. It's a parliamentary composition. So we have precedent as well with the NDP becoming the opposition to the Democrat Labour Party, and the
What is
Barbados Labour
different?
Party becoming.
Hold on, Devaron. What is fundamentally different? Because the Constitution of Barbados does not recognize the political parties, but recognizes who can command the majority. And at that time, Dr. Haynes could command the majority. He had the majority support.
Right.
And that is what pushed aside the Barbados Labour Party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm flat down to the support again.
Yeah. Fair point.
All right.
All right, so
I want to switch a little bit. Sorry, Terry, you want to go ahead?
well, just to follow up on the fact we've debated whether we should have the debate. So we spent a lot of time debating that, right? Ironically. But we've had the debate, and I just want to pose this question to George. I guess with the optics of a very poised, well-mannered, and measured, is more flanked by two, let's be generous and say, very confident men. As a Democratic Labour Party, have they missed an opportunity here? Is there going to be some fallout? Because they were pretty much in the vanguard of, they pretty much had the narrative of the election going pretty much in their favor. They were coming back, but now that they have skipped the debate, they kind of pulled up the public discussion, public viewpoint. What do you think?
Exactly the point that I made earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, when you follow the various clips and stuff, and the rainfall in this week didn't help Floyd Reefer either. It didn't help Floyd or the Democratic Labour Party. Really and truly, in terms of the news cycle, he and the LP practically fell off the radar during the week.
Right.
And what came to dominate then were just the three persons involved in the debate, and more or less the three candidates. And to a large extent, you can say Mitchell won the debate. Because regardless of where what people are asking about Mitchell, they weren't asking more so much, or they weren't asking me about Solutions Barbados and my guy and my friend Mr. Phillips. They were predominantly asking about Mitchell, and I do not think that we should get such criteria that we push aside eccentricity as a characteristic.
Right.
Perhaps, if it can be proven, a particular disorder, but certainly not eccentricity.
You know, earlier I was actually having the same conversation. Terry and we were talking. I said, you know, in writing my questions and stuff, I actually didn't have anything to write about Floyd. Even in writing the opening spiel and everything, I didn't have anything to write about Floyd, and that's because like he just wasn't visible this week. His supporters are saying, you know, he won by not attending the circus, and I actually disagree because everybody's watching the circus. There was nothing else to watch, right? I just want to read a quick question here though, because I want to go back to what we were before we share from what we were talking about. Tony is saying that the leader of the opposition is not a function of the number of votes garnered at the polls. The person who commands the support of the majority of those numbers not supporting the government.
Yeah,
that is pretty much correct. Yeah.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
All right. But you guys can go ahead. Just wanted to touch on that before we stray too far from the topic.
No problem.
Thank you for your comment, Tony.
Let's get your take on, has the Democratic Labour Party missed a beat? Have they? What do you think?
I think there's an argument. Yes, I think there's an argument that can be made, and yourself and George did make it. But we must remember we're having this discussion as individuals who are not voting in St. George North. It is whether or not the persons who have the ability to vote come November the 11th cared about the debate. I think the question even has to be raised whether there's any minds to be changed at this point, because we understand that Barbados is divided generally between two political parties. Persons know where the support base lie. And quite frankly, I don't think there's a huge gasp of people who were sitting around waiting on the debate to determine who they're going to vote for. So yes, we can say that Floyd probably lost some of the national spotlight, and he carried much of it during the by-election, but does it fundamentally change the strength of his position on the ground in that constituency for persons who have to vote? And ironically, we're talking about Floyd, but I'm not saying any large or any real stories coming about Tony Moore's participation in the debate. Again, as George highlighted, it has been Alex it has been Alex. So I don't think that she gained anywhere where either. She's not on the front page of any paper as far as I've seen. So it's not like there was some huge win. And people know that there was a competence from her to begin with. She's the head of the largest trade union in Barbados. Nobody's surprised that she can speak. Nobody's surprised that she can defend herself. Nobody's surprised that she has a grasp on policy. So I don't think that there was anything major to be gained. And we should ask the question, would Mayor Motley put herself on the stage with Grenville Phillips and Alex Mitchell? We should ask ourselves that question.
I think I said something at the very beginning, and that is the only statement I'm going to make in response to your comments, Devaron. She said something about perception, how major. She said it's 9 times. I would say perhaps it's more. Perception. Perception is politics. It can distort the reality to the extent that you're not able to recognize it. That was the hallmark of Trump's victory 4 years ago. Don't worry about the proclivity to steal, or to keep down the vote, suppress the vote. It is the very perception of what is going on, sometimes more than the reality, that will be borne out. And I think that is what you should hinge on in answering. So I agree with Ayo on that one.
Thank you. Somebody agrees with me. Let me just read this one comment from the viewers quickly. Marie Hall, I think she's saying a lot of what Devaron is saying too. A little bit different, but let's read it. We have to be very careful not to be idealist about what is being discussed. Talking about policy and personalities, the real politics in this by-election suggests that people are concerned about bread and butter issues. I believe it will boil down to which candidate the constituents believe is best able to provide for them. On the other hand, if the people are sufficiently disgruntled with broken promises and the overall performance of the government, then they are likely to demonstrate that in how they vote.
Fair enough.
Anything on that? But I think that's elections in general, though. People vote based on how they're feeling about the ruling party. Usually, it is the incumbent's election to lose. Usually, so I think we kind of agree with what she's saying in theory. Yeah.
If I had to
the interesting thing.
Oh, go ahead, Devaron.
No, the interesting thing is that in an election, a candidate should play to their strengths. I do not think that any right-thinking individual would think that Floyd Reefer is ready to be on a stage with Tony Moore, who has far more experience in dealing with these issues than he does. His strength is the fact that he runs on the basis that he is a man of the constituency, a man of the ground, as opposed to an import into the constituency. So I thought he was smart in playing to his strengths, and the discussion we're having is his absence rather than a poor performance, which I think would have been even worse than absence. So comparatively, if we put Floyd Reefer and Tony Moore on a stage, it is very likely in that context, in that specific strategic context, she will win. But that is not his strong suit. His strong suit is clearly on the ground, and he played to his strong suit. So how can we critique something like that? Why would he go put himself in the situation?
I can agree with you. But actually, sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
You can critique it because the reality is being on the ground in St. George North or in St. George South or in the parish of St. George has not been Floyd Reefer's strong point. He has been invisible. The extent now that his name, his family name, has a strong bearing, that's the strong point. And that is what perhaps he should have been strategically looking to capitalize upon.
Yeah,
what about his presence?
Yeah, I'm not gonna accept that from you either.
But it's factual. I live in St. George, and I've been living in St. George.
Yeah, so I think I agree with George. I'm not gonna accept that. I'm not gonna accept that from you because, in fact, it wasn't the case that he would have been on a stage with Tony. He would have been on a stage with Tony, Mr. Mitchell, Granville Phillips II. So he wasn't on the stage just with Tony. And we're talking about a man that was a Barbados captain, a West Indies captain. He needs to be able, to represent himself. But I take your point that it may not be his strongest suit. But he would not have been, very cleverly, he would not have been on a stage with Tony. I see that move. He would have been on a stage with those four. And honestly, I think he would have come off as a reasonable person. Next, flanked by let's be generous.
And he's an old large boy. He's an old large boy. We got a little support, a little empathy.
I agree with all of you. Like, I see Devaron's point. Like, yeah. From a strategy point of view, yeah. And I know, and then the idea that they just went to other parties and so look, dropping these debates so they can get that support also. So it doesn't look as though they're running from the debates, because I mean, we had candidates who actually admitted that they were actually dropping debates, right? So I'm not talking out of my ear, literally saying what they're saying. And so I get Devaron's point on that, but I also agree with Tyree in that, I mean, the least that would have happened at the debates is what he would have came in second. That's the worst that would have happened. He would have.
But this is hindsight.
Second is loss.
Wrong with that.
Coming in second is a loss in the two-party system.
It is, and I agree with you. But at the same time, I would also admit, and I said it in my opening, that I did not hear a lot of policy coming from Tony either. Like, she left me wanting to hear what it is that she personally, right, wanted to do in the constituency. Everything that she said came back down to the government's overall policy, and I get that because her government isn't in power. They already have a program set, so she's basically going to carry out that program. I though would have loved to hear her say some of the things that she would have would want to do on the ground. So maybe having Floyd in the debate, and it's funny, that when if you're moving with Giraffe, then you rise to the level of So maybe if she had somebody else in the debate, then maybe she would have had the opportunity to basically go on and talk about what her policies would have been, and so it would have forced her to raise her level also. But I can't imagine having to debate my friend over there.
And whose interest would it be that she raises her level in the debate? It would not be in his interest that she performs better. So if he comes onto there and gives her some level of challenge and she steps up to the plate even further, that is not in his interest. Yeah, so again, strategically, it made no sense for him to be there.
I agree with you in that. On that, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying.
Yeah, all this is hindsight.
And I think I was saying that based on the fact that my critique of her was that I didn't hear a lot of policy coming out from her. Right, so we can't say that her debate was perfect. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of imagination. That's what I was saying, right? But it could have been better, and maybe if Floyd was there, it may have been better because he was there, or he may have shown up the fact that she wasn't talking policy. That was me finishing the thought now. Yeah.
Let's put on one more reality that. I know most persons will run away from it. Mm-hmm. We speak of perception and reality. The perception, when I speak to persons around St. George North and I go around and have my little bank beer, etc. I keep things real. I'm one to call it as it is. You know what people are telling me? If Floyd performed good, and give me a good second, I'll seriously consider him in 2 years' time when there's a general election. Because right now he can't help me and I ain't looking to vote for him. Even if he can't do anything, so why would I waste a vote on him? That's a reality we want, that we don't like to talk about it. But that comes right back to the bread and butter issue. That is the bread and butter issue. It is, we still have that climate of what can you actually do for me?
Fair enough. Yeah.
I would add in there and say for sure there's a segment of our political culture that is very dependent on and expects that level of patronage and return. But I think we need to move away from that and recognize that government is only one actor in the state. There is the private sector, there's the community level, there are individuals, there are charities, there are a whole host of entities within the state that can get things done other than government. So I don't like to push that view that, because you're in opposition, nothing can be done. That is not the case. We need
That's
to stop.
exactly why I like Solutions Barbados. I like Mr. Phillips. I like to read Mr. Phillips' comments, and I enjoyed listening to him talk about his engineering background and contracting work and giving some of these youngsters a chance, because I know if they're busy working, they can't be busy committing crimes. So I don't have a problem. In fact, I think government can perhaps lend the olive branch and see how they can inculcate some of his ideas into getting some programs that stimulate real work in St. George North. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you, Devaron, on that.
So Dr. Brathwaite, I want to pick up on something you said a little earlier in your early response on that as you move around St. George North, members of the constituency are sharing with you that, if Floyd was to perform admirably at this point in time, then maybe they will consider him at a future point in time. What would be that level of performance? So what would constitute like a victory, having not winning the seat, but what would constitute a victory for the Democratic Party and for Floyd, given that the Barbados Party won, I think it's 81% of the vote, shared the vote last time, and Democratic Party only got 13%. Like, what would that look like?
All right, that's an excellent question, because we have to be able to look at it in a real and objective sense. I think last election was an anomaly, but overall, Glenn Clark's representation has been 56% has been his low, and his average is in the 60s in terms of the percentage of the vote.
Yep. On
the flip side of that, while the Democratic Labour Party would have been there with Cyril Walker, and before that, name slipping me, the first one in 1971. The reality, the Democratic Labour Party has never touched the threshold of 50% of the people in St. George North. They've never touched that threshold. If Floyd can perform within a similar range of Colin Spencer, in my mind, he would have done exceptionally well.
Okay.
And that means that you can say he would have a future. It was a good try. I do not know if his interest will continue. That is something that you have to ask, because of course, he's a very talented person, and he's taking up coaching, and I think he has been impressive, even though we did not meet success last year in the World Cup. The point is, and I know this from being around university, the persons do cling to him and listen to him, and he does have a positive impact with a number of young persons. So the idea for him would have to be, can I make my mark reaching Colin Spencer or surpassing Colin Spencer, even though that I may fall short? And if he falls short and the Democratic Labour Party is willing to put resources around it, it means that whether Tony gets in or not, the Barbados Labour Party, if they want to hold on to the seat, would have to carry all the promises that are being made now. And they will have to really make inroads into some of those things that these people in St. George North are complaining about at this time. And they only have a 2-year span, even with difficult circumstances. So it will be putting pressure on the Barbados Labour Party to perform.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that makes sense. I'm going to let Devaron share his thoughts on that question in a moment, but I want to continue with you with this one. Do we think that Floyd is in this for the long haul? Is Floyd going to just be like, is he some sort of night watchman? Is he just here for now, and then in the future elections, general elections, the Democratic Party shift him aside? Do we think Floyd is going to be in St. George North for a period of time? Do we think that? Well, do you think that?
I think it will. Oh, Devaron.
No, I'm going to let you follow. I'm going to let you answer this, and then the same 2 questions to Devaron. Like, what constitutes victory, and is Floyd in it for the long haul? What do you think?
I think he can be here in there for the long haul, but it depends on who is going to spend the time in a short time frame of 2 years, really nurturing him politically. Because if you're coming, he's not coming necessarily with lots of baggage. What he's coming with is lots of potential. Already there's a man past 40. Not that I'm discriminating on the basis of age, but I'm suggesting that if he's young into politics, he's immature to that reality in terms of politics. But if he gets the appropriate help within the bosom of the Democratic Labour Party, then they might be able to shape winners. You do shape winners. In fact, the current Prime Minister lost the first time she ran. The current Prime Minister, and there are several others that have lost. Glenn Clark lost the first time he ran. So there are ways that you can be shaped into a position and make a definitive mark. He has things working for him, and he needs to improve on those things that we may consider shortcomings at this time. So it is a decision up to him, and I sure a lot will rest on how he does in this particular race on the 11th of November.
Fair enough. Devaron?
So I would have to agree with George in saying that if he performs similar to how Colin Spencer performed in 2008, that is the basis of success, or the greatest level of success, minus not winning the seat. But the real question should be the probability of it happening, because 2008 was a swing election where the Democratic Labour Party had a swing of about 11% in its favor. And even then, they only gathered 40% of St. George North's vote. This is a period where there was considerable support behind the Democratic Labour Party financially, candidate-wise. The mood of the country was changing. The infrastructure of the Democratic Labour Party was at its best at that period. You have a Democratic Labour Party currently who is in the doldrums. It has no parliamentary representation. It has no money. It does not have a quality leader, some would argue, and they do not have the necessary support in order to coalesce around Floyd in order for him to perform in a similar way that Colin Spencer performed. You had David Thompson at the head of the ticket then. Right now you have Roberto Pisa, and the two cannot be compared at the current stage. Now, going forward, whether Floyd has a life in politics by the next election, George pointed out very well that, quite frankly, the possibility is there because he has potential. But is the Democratic Labour Party in a position as a political institution to coalesce around Floyd Rayford when they have 30 other seats to win? That is the problem. They have so much work to do. Do they actually have the potential and the ability to coalesce around Floyd and develop him and build him just for that one seat? And they have so many other problems that they must face. That is the reality that I think the party in itself must confront. So you may have a good candidate, but the party is not in a strong position to do anything with good candidates or potentially good or viable candidates.
In a general election?
In a general election.
Okay. All right. I want to just thank our viewers once more. Thank you for being here. I say all the time, you have choices. So when you come here, I'm eternally grateful. So thank you for being here. And I always want to make sure that the guests get a chance to hear your comments and respond to your questions. So I just want to read a couple quickly. The first one is really a compliment to you, Devaron. I have no question. This is Sasha. Sasha is saying she has no question, but she's enjoying the interaction on tonight's show. I'd love to see Devaron back again to hear his views on future politics. And then we have Sean Knight. Sean Knight is talking about Floyd, he's saying, but he's running for a seat in Parliament where he will speak to the issues affecting the constituents. If he cannot represent on a debate stage, how does he represent in Parliament? Which is the perennial question that has been asked, especially by Barbados Party supporters, right? And Sandiata is asking, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Sandiata is asking, Floyd has a huge challenge trying to win a seat that can be obviously considered a Barbados Party stronghold. If he is to be marketed and used as the fresh face of a battered DLP, then he must be able to publicly discuss policy. And I actually agree. in a great deal with that.
Very good comment.
Yeah.
Very good comment from the person.
Yeah. So thank you all for your comments and questions. Please continue to send them, and we will continue to answer them as we go along. All right. So do we want to change pace a little bit, because we talked about the debate quite a bit? I'm pretty sure we'll get back there at some point. But I want to move forward a little bit and ask a different type of question. Even though we don't really expect a third party to make any real strides in Barbados, you know, I believe that it could happen. It has happened before, and it can happen again. In fact, I think that right now is a perfect opportunity for a third party to get serious, build funding, generate mass support, especially if the Democratic Labour Party continues to limp along. It effectively leaves an opening for a third party to ease through that gap, especially with so many people seemingly disillusioned about the current mass parties, right? Should psychiatric evaluations be necessary in order for people to become candidates? And this includes those starting political parties. This is not a joke question. This is a very serious question. All right. Should psychiatric evaluations be necessary, gentlemen?
So I will give you a serious answer and say no, because a person's psychology goes beyond, just as George says, an eccentric personality. An individual may very well be in government and is highly stressed, and that stress has psychological impacts on how they perform. So do we test that individual to see if they should continue to govern? There are many, many instances and many, many things that contribute to a person's psychological well-being. Do we speak about a person's health? Should we test a person's health then to see whether or not they should participate in politics? What are the criteria? Why are we bringing this criteria up as a means to what I would consider a way to victimize people? I may very well argue that, you know, someone making statements that may be considered a gaffe might be an insight into their psychological well-being. They may have memory issues. They may have, you know, arithmetic issues. If remember the Dennis Kelmans of the world, for instance. But that does not speak to the fact that a person can be a good representative because they have instances of weaknesses. That is, and
I agree with you, but a mathematical weakness is not a weakness of a psychological issue, and it's not to victimize a person. I don't want you to get that idea that we're trying to victimize anybody. I mean, this is twice that we've had similar types of candidates sneaking through on third parties. Can you imagine? And I'm pretty sure we've had Mad Kings before. You understand? And we've seen where that has led. We've had, nobody's going to tell me Hitler was a mad. And we've seen where that has led. And we know Trump is mad. And we see where that has led. Right? Should we be trying to avoid these types of candidates coming to the platform?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because number one, I'm not trained in clinical psychology, and I can't make that determination, nor am I a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And I think that would be a most important. That would be another form of institutional discrimination. And I'm going to say there are too many persons in Barbados that are already marginalized and pushed aside because of their eccentricities or because they are unique in whatever way they are. And you're going to still ask these same people to come and vote for you and support somebody else. Huh? Come on. No, I'm like Devaron, I'm absolutely against any such measure. No.
All righty.
If there's certifiable evidence that you already are, perhaps that can preclude you. I do not think it's your business to go there present to have someone tested. Are they going to look at, and the way the world is going, are they going to carry out tests like how they carry out on the 100-meter run in South Africa, the young lady? What I call a young lady, a Black African lady, because she was winning. Because you're winning,
so you guys see,
they're going to test your hormone content. They're going to test the levels of your hormones. So no, I will not support anything that brings in any form of institutional discrimination, whether sex, gender, the age. If I saw Mr. Compton come back at 80 years old and could win an election and become Prime Minister of St. Lucia again. So I'm not even putting age against it. I'm just saying that these things, they're unusual. So when they're not necessarily the norm. So if you have an eccentric person that comes into the parliament or presents himself as a candidate, and the people, through the voice of the people, and they want to support that person and make that person as a winner, why would I want to deny them?
All right, I guess
Okay.
I could say something at this point. I guess the offer. Well, I guess we have to admit that. I guess
you don't have to defend me. You say what you. It's okay.
See this, right? Perhaps I think it may be the case that a large percentage of individuals currently occupying the halls of assembly probably suffer from some sort of narcissistic type of personality disorder or
Well, they have to.
megalomania of some type, right?
As far as I'm concerned, they have to.
So perhaps this whole idea of a psychometric test isn't a good idea. But I just to play devil's advocate and just give you offer some support to you. We do insist on psychometric testing for individuals. Individuals wanting to be a pilot, wanting to a job such as like a security job, a security guard.
I've taken them before for jobs just doing sales.
Barbados are accustomed to getting psychometric testing. I mean, why should we not? Given everything you said, both Devaron and Dr. Brathwaite, why should we not test these individuals before they are able to offer themselves up to the public for election? I'm playing devil's
I think they said why.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying I don't want to sound like I'm changing the discussion, but I think Barbadians are more concerned about things such as whether a politician has any peculiar relationships with certain individuals or any liabilities that may cause them to actually do, the harms that they've done in the past. So I don't think the psychology of a person and, picking at various things is where we ought to take it. If we want to look at the background of politicians, I think we have to go in the direction of declaration of assets and those various aspects, not psychological evaluations.
Exactly.
But I actually agree with everything that you said, and I also think that we should make sure that people are seen before we let them go on the public person to be in charge of constituents and all these types of things.
Who's going to make tests? Are you going to construct this test?
No, that's not for me. This is for the clinical psychologists. This is not for me to do.
Interestingly enough, a good example is the UK system. If you watch how you have nominations in the UK for the various parties, there are plenty clowns that are on the stage that you would see standing on the same stage as a nomination for a prime minister. People that dress up in costumes, people that look in all kinds of ways and behave in all kinds of ways, and they're allowed to be on the ballot. No psychological testing or evaluation is done. So quite frankly, I don't think that's something we should consider.
Good point.
Listen, I can remind you.
But I have support from the audience.
We've had Julian Hunt run in Barbados on more than one occasion. Very, he's dead now. Not the newly installed senator. Julian Hunt.
I know Julian Hunt. I remember him.
Right. We've had a very personal and close friend of mine to this day who enjoyed a birthday just over a week ago. And starting off with a medical condition. And because of a deterioration, not eating the time and stuff like that, created things decline and spurred another condition. So you can, I don't think it is nice.
I understand that stress and stuff can bring on depression and so forth. All those are psychological problems, right? And I am well aware of that. But
diabetes and people,
But there are psychological issues, and then there are psychological issues, psychiatric issues, right? So but that's just by the way. Studiata is saying here that I have no, what's that? No, sorry. He's saying here that it is always sad to have a leader die in office. However, our leaders take tests. Sorry, having our leaders take tests or at least making their general state of health public is a step in the right direction for me. Okay, he's talking about the overall health, but that's a little bit different for me. Like, I don't need to know the personal state of their physical health, right? Because that's a personal issue.
Yeah.
However, that's definitely a personal issue for me. All right, so that's a different thing altogether. All right. Going forward, since I'm not getting any support on that question, Terry, you want to answer that question?
Let me think of it. I just want to get we're returning back to the debate. Let's want to get the take of our guests on the closing statements. So I'm going to play a clip from the debate on the closing statements from the candidates, and just get your take on the Brathwaite and Devaron.
Mr. Mitchell. Closing statement, 1 minute.
I would hope that we would clear up the issue of the land, clear title land, so people can go to the bank and tap into that $24 billion that is sitting there, and they can give themselves their own permission to do what they need to do. That is one of the main focuses of everything, because everything we talk about is connected to the land. Even if you're dead, they got to dig a hole for you. So we must figure that out. We must stop these things that doesn't work. I know what doesn't work, but we don't have enough time for that. You tell me that I have a minute, so I see if I got 2 minutes, is it 2 minutes or 1 minute?
1 minute.
Well, I think I used up a minute. I don't want to violate the rules up in here. All right?
I would like to use this minute speaking to the people of St. George North. And I would want to say to them that having examined the issues that we have raised, many of them national level issues, in going around with you, I've been treating to you as it relates to the parochial issues. You do not want a representative that is now trying to test the waters, that a representative that is trying to implement far-fetched ideas in a one-man kind of situation where they cannot connect to the direction in which the government is heading. Under the representation that I present to you, I come to you understanding the demands of social justice. I come to you with a sincere interest in identifying and promoting your interests, and that is what you will get when you support me on November 11th in the election. You will get more.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes, a lot of the problems in St. George North are engineering related, and therefore it's in the people's interest to have the representative being an engineer. The Prime Minister does want my friend here, Tony Moore, to do some heavy lifting. The people can have their cake and eat it too. The same way that the Prime Minister appointed Lisa Cummings from the Senate and made her a Minister of Tourism, she could do the same thing with Tony Moore. And therefore, for the next 30 months, the people of St. George North can get me to address the problems. I should say one more thing. The Prime Minister promised that on wedge issues, there would be referendum. And we are being forced into accepting Republican status and same-sex unions. This is wrong. I understand the concept.
All right, so that's the clear. So every child knows that you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Every child knows that. But I just want to get your take on the closing statements for Alex Mitchell, Granville Phillips II, and Tony Moore. Ms. Tony Moore. Devaron, you want to kick off?
Well,
Devaron, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure if there's much that can be said to the Alex Mitchell aspect. I'll leave that to the person who creates memes.
Mm-hmm.
But regarding Tony Moore, you see, this is why I said that debates are a show. Because I'll be honest, this is the first time I'm hearing that. And the first thing that came to mind was rehearsed. So the idea that there is anything really genuine, and me as a debater, as the one who's done debates before, I know the amount of preparation that goes into these things. I've been behind the scenes of these things before. So there's just not a genuineness that you can discern out of these things. That was clearly a rehearsed and prepared statement. Whether it was a good statement or not, I'll leave that for someone else, but all that came to mind was rehearsed. Now, regarding Granville's one, that was highly convoluted. I'm not sure where he was taking it. He started with the engineering aspect, then he went into appointment of Tony Moore to the Senate. I'm not sure where he was taking that. And then he ended with the referendum. I'm not sure where he was taking that. So at least Tony Moore had a rehearsed response that was of good quality. I mean, at least you can do that if you're on a debate stage.
Bro, with being prepared is so cynical.
Right. So, because I mean, we both know that, Ron, that even in debates, yes, we prepare and everything, and we go on the stage and people are clapping for the points that we've rehearsed. Right? It's different, I think, in a political, because when you're going on a debate, you know if you're the proposer or the opposer ahead of time, and you prepare your question based on that. But in a political debate, you don't have the questions ahead of time. At least you're not supposed to have the questions ahead of time. So I think what you heard just now, what we heard just now, was Tony's prepared closing statement, which is absolutely nothing wrong with that in my mind. So I don't want to admit. I think I'm just saying that being prepared, there's nothing cynical about being prepared. In fact, you should be prepared. I would expect that all candidates will come to the platform prepared, right? But anyhow, go ahead.
I concur with you, Ayo, on that one in terms of the preparation. Where I differ on the interpretation that Devaron given. First thing, I thought perhaps it was the clearest and perhaps most accurate and least controversial statement that Mr. Mitchell made all night was his closing statement.
Mm-hmm.
Short, factual, and yeah.
It was only his main point, his only point. Yeah.
Realistically, there are several issues relating to land and property that, if pursued and conducted in a proper way, would bring a lot of relief to a lot of people in Barbados. So that one is factual, and I thought that was his best statement for the night. I'm going to go in the order of me. In terms of Miss Moore, unfortunately, I thought that was perhaps not her best statement of the night. Reason being, it was the one single opportunity she had to look in the camera, which she did. I heard the sincerity in her voice, and I detected it in facial expression. But we already know that you're using a political party as a vehicle. And what can emerge from her, in my opinion, was what the Barbados Labour Party will do. It was not what Tony Moore will do. And I know that young lady, and I know how positive, I know how strong, I know how effective she can be. I thought that is when you really needed to personalize it. We already understand the attachment to the Barbados Labour Party. But that was the time for me to have that real special personal moment with the people of St. George North. In terms of Granville, I think it was true to form. It demonstrates a certain consistency in terms of his writing, his talking, and perhaps his action. There's a consistency that emerges with him. So you cannot say that he's bringing distorted messages. He may be bringing messages that may appear idealistic to a great deal, but you cannot say that there's the disorientation. So he's been talking about all three things that he mentioned about. I am for a republic, and I heard him say that anybody that it was lunacy to want a republic. And I took firm offense and objection to that. But that's his view, and he was consistent. I don't think referendums work. They're not the best pieces of artistry of democracy. what they're allowed to obtain at any particular moment is the popular discourse to get the ascendancy, particularly when government's hands, in attempting to be fair, since it's not, it doesn't carry the same dynamics as the general election, the hands are tied, and they can do least to support whatever initiative is they want to take. So I don't even advise referendum. And as I said, in terms of that part was left out, but in terms of going on the same-sex marriage, and I think that is another form of getting an attraction and hitting on a visibility item.
Yeah.
For that.
So he did that well.
To the extent he did that.
Interestingly enough, George, you and I don't disagree, because I said rehearse and you asked for something that was more personal. So I was asking for the same thing, something more spontaneous and something more real. So we did not disagree at all.
The point that you made, George, where you say that you don't like referendums, and I'll say this, I actually don't mind the referendum. I don't like referendums on human rights issues. This is what I don't like. I do not like referendums on human rights issues. I think that an elected government is supposed, you be elected, then you make decisions for what is right for the country and in the time that it is happening. Do you understand where I'm coming from? I don't like a referendum on. I don't want a referendum, but this might be me being biased, and this might be me being wanting to have it my way too, because you have to say that at the same time. I want my views to prevail. But I don't want a referendum on if we become a republic or not. To me, that's natural progression. A referendum is unnecessary on that, and a referendum is always unnecessary when it has to do with human rights issues. But continue, sir. Anything to add to that?
I'm in agreement with you when it comes to referenda. They have to be on issues that are of substance. We've discussed the going republic for generations now. There is nothing that people do not fully understand or know about it. And let's be honest, there is also nothing that fundamentally changes in the day-to-day lives of people that you need to take it to that you need to have a referendum or republic. And then you have to consider the political culture that we currently operate under, that I think George was alluding to. The fact that not only government's hands are tied, but the opposition's hands are unleashed. And rather than be responsible and, support things that are obviously in need of support, they'd use it as an opportunity or as a dagger into the side of the government before an election. And things just get unnecessarily crazy. A lot of issues come up that have absolutely nothing to do with referenda, and then the opposition just tries to use it as, I guess you would say, precisely. So I don't think it is necessary for that.
I can tell you, I had the experience of working very closely with the one in Antigua. I was actually, on a weekly basis, I was going into in front of Prime Minister Brown and reporting on what was going on, etc. And we were feeding and putting a lot of information out in terms of, and I guess there were raising levels of confidence, even although, as Devaron is suggesting, the UPP in Antigua began to play more and more hardball. This is the reality. If Ms. Motley calls a referendum within the next year on that, she wants it by November, the go to Republic by November. This is what will happen. We will lose. The country will lose. The reason being, you will get those oppositional forces beginning to work. But well, in the general election and in the by-election, you need just a margin of 1 for victory. The threshold normally that you find in referenda are normally 2/3 majority. That has been the general thing. The ante becomes much higher and much more. And it will be foolhardy. And I am telling you, Miss Motley, and this is not about political sides or anything like that. The lady is sharp politically, very astute politically, very, very exceptionally sharp. And she would have recognized that. And she recognizes she has an overwhelming mandate. And when you have an overwhelming mandate, you use your political capital to do the things that may otherwise be a hindrance to you.
So stop.
Full stop.
Totally agree with you.
I love it.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, none to add to that. Somebody saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the referendum is on same-sex marriage and not same-sex unions. A same-sex union is a mere legal issue. At least that's what I gathered from the current speech. Actually, some same-sex union. There was no move to introduce same-sex marriage. It's just the legal aspect, which is union. So that's what the church has definitely missed the mark on that one, because nobody's going to church to get married. They're going to court with a judge and they're having a union.
Teaching political philosophy. Many of the persons in the church need to do some, I think, some background reading on why there was actually all those things that led up to the separation of church and state. They need to go and read a person like Dante, and who spoke about the hypocrisy, where you would escalate the discourse, not to recognize that the very Christian principles that you want to hem on spoke about tolerance, spoke about non-discrimination, spoken about loving thy neighbor as thyself. And I don't often get into this debate. I do not like the idea of seeing people, regardless of whether it is through sex, gender, or anything, they're marginalized. I know what marginalization is. So I understand. And I think that rather than the church attempt to change the agenda, the church perhaps needs to do some background reading and then be stronger in pushing for things like civics to be taught in our schools.
Fair enough. Yeah.
The only thing I would add before coming forward was George made reference to the 75% threshold in referenda, but that is in the OECS. Don't forget, within the Barbadian context, there's no legal basis for referenda. It is really a measure of the person's sentiments, the populist sentiments, but there's no threshold of 50%, 70%, and there's no legitimacy in a referenda. So that is the only distinction that would
precisely
make.
You have to create the laws for it. It wasn't
precisely.
There.
Yes, in the Barbadian context, but the OECS, yes, we need the 75% majority. Now, regarding the issue of the church's response to same-sex unions and same-sex marriage, it is not surprising. It is a position that they have held for decades, centuries, and what have you. So I'm not surprised they are on the streets marching, and they have every right to engage in such activity, for sure. But that does not mean that they're on the right side of history, and I think that's the issue that they face now, that they're holding on to something that, quite frankly, has no real bearing of significance in the 21st century. Much of the concerns that they speak about regarding same-sex marriage and same-sex unions, they have no real bearing in the 21st century. And whether you march on the street or not, people will do what people want to do. So you don't change anything. I think that's a reality that they need to face.
I agree with you, Devaron. I think the real problem comes with the conflation of the issues. And the second issue is not really in the national discourse. The only one that group, of course, saying it. But the reality is, we understand that persons in Barbados have been discriminated on for years, and the more we progress as a nation, the more we have to make these reforms and change the rules to ensure that you are not practicing institutional discrimination. And that is all I'm seeing. So I don't have a problem with same-sex unions because they've been existing, and some of us turn off when we want to, and want to expose it when it suits us. But what same-sex marriage is a different kettle of fish, and it is not part. It is not on the national agenda, not in terms of governance. That's it.
Yeah, if I could share on this point, and I want to take you back to a couple other things. Yeah, I mean, we as a people have been opposed to oppression in one form, particularly with respect to racism. So I don't think that we should be supported in any form, right? So we spend a lot of time opposing oppression in one of its forms. We need to be aware of oppression in any other form and spend a lot of time trying to not stop it and stop doing that. But I want to take you back to some comments. Do you two agree that Mrs. Moore's closing statement was scripted? I don't know that I agree with that at all. I think she responded on the moment to comments that were emanating from Granville Phillips, second, and from Alex Mitchell. So I think there was some sort of there was more than just a scripted response that she gave. If you listen to her closely, she could not have prepared herself to hear Granville say that he was an engineer several times. She could not have prepared herself for the comments that were emanating from Alex Mitchell. And she did in her closing statement refer to them, right? So I think it was a little bit more dynamic than just a scripted statement. So I think you need to give her a little more credit there, Devaron.
My correction, but Terry, I never suggested that it was scripted. I said it ought to have been a lot more personal. It hitched itself to the BLP wagon, and I thought that was the point. That there needs to be that disconnection where you're looking into the camera.
Right.
She said it. I'm speaking to you, the people of St. George North. But let your message be personal and direct. I didn't think it needed to be hitched to the the political wagon at that point.
Point accepted. And regarding the need for a referendum concerning the move to become a republic, I don't think it's necessary either. We've been on this road before. Both parties, both political parties, both of the major engines of social progress in this society, Democratic Party and Progressive Party, both support it. I don't think that we need to go in the direction of a referendum with regards to becoming a republic either. Yeah, so those are my 2 cents on, well, 3 cents on those 3 points. Ayo, you have anything else, Todd?
I'm going to ask my final questions for the night. I think we have like 15 to 10 minutes left. We have 10 minutes left. So I just want to ask one more question. And audience, if you have any more questions, I'll probably take about, if somebody's asking, what benefit is there to gain if anyone other than Tony Moore is nominated? For something to be done in any constituency, the person's elected party must be empowered. That's going back to what George was saying a bit earlier. All right. Right. So I just want to answer this final question. We'll take a few more from the audience and comments also. So the question of quality of candidates is of interest to me.
Again?
This is a different question.
Okay. Go ahead.
In the last election, Prime Minister Mia Mottley went about pointedly handpicking her candidates. We saw this with Ryan Strong and Marcia Cadell and maybe a few more. In fact, her rally cry was literally, I need this person to do this or to do that. She was saying this to the constituents, and I thought that was a very powerful cry. She was planting it in their brains on every platform that she need this person, and she's also doing that now with Tony. She picked her for the seat in St. George North. And I think she says something, I am paraphrasing here, and I could be wrong, I don't want to be sued, but, I think that one of the things she said to avoid government on issues related to labor as Barbados works through this COVID situation or words to that effect. I know there's a view that this neutralizes labor, but I think how Tony will respond, both as senior leader, and I'm pretty sure she'll be a backbencher, so as a government backbencher, when she's elected, will answer that question. But going back to my original thought, is the quality of candidate a real issue that we have to deal with, and should political leaders of parties do a lot more handpicking of candidates to make sure that we get the highest quality coming to the table?
Interestingly, the state and, well, let me restart that. This is a question about democracy and governance. Both are not the same. So you might have an instance where the popular vote may give you someone that won the seat, but when it comes to governance, they're not of quality to perform any task that is necessary for the continuation and effectiveness of the state. I don't think the response should be the handpicking of individuals to do that. I don't think it should be through the Senate either. The simple response I think we should have is a national seat or national seats as well as constituency seats. So currently we have a composition in Parliament of 30. Why do we not put it to 40? We have 30 constituency seats, and there are 10 national seats that will be determined through maybe a representative approach. So if you have a situation like the last election where the Barbados Party won 70% of the seats, or rather the vote, they get 7 of those 10 seats, and the opposition gets 3 out of those seats. We can use proportional representation, for instance, to have those individuals who you would consult with the constituency, who you would consult with at the national level, the private sector, the labor unions, and what start to determine who these quality individuals are, and you can bring those individuals through those national seats to help you govern in the executive branch and in cabinet. That is the approach I would take, as opposed to an individual handpicking over a democratic process. You can have both as opposed to one contradicting the next.
Okay. What do you say, Dr. Brathwaite?
It seems as though Devaron is much closer to Prime Minister Mia Motley than I assumed. Because, you know, Miss Motley is a very creative woman. And she thinks critically through several issues. And that has been because of my interaction with her. And I had interactions with other leaders, including David Thompson, like that. We exchanged lots of ideas. And that is one that Ms. Motley spoke about. And it was she actually publicized it at a meeting, the fact that she wanted to increase. I was one against it, not for the principle of it, but at a time when we were chastising the Democratic Labour Party in terms of wastage, in terms of money and stuff, I did not think that it was advisable that any party looking to come into power, in terms of the reforms, to go ahead and look to increase the money that you have to pay out parliamentarians, even though I understood the basis, just like I am agreeing with Devaron, perhaps rather than having, we can have more, and you can make some form of it proportional, and it gives a better reflection of everything in terms of the nation. However, the other caveat I have is in relation to what we call the democratic process. I have seen in the past where a former prime minister, now deceased, attempted to have his own way, and obviously was not sufficiently influential in getting the handpicked person. Politics is perception. And that is when you recognize that a political party or a political leader may be at the stage when their power is waning. Ms. Motley is now in, and with such a commanding majority, her party is at the heights. It is at a zenith. And if she is not able to use the political capital that she has, she will come across as being weak. And you have to do that. You have to use your influence, your persuasiveness. You bring the other persons that will be at the table, and you talk, you negotiate. But that is all part of it. Leaders should have 2 things, if nothing else. 1, they should have a vision, and 2, they should have confidence to exercise and move towards that vision so that they can have followers. And once you have, and I think that is what you saw when Ms. Motley recognized, look, the climate we're in terms of pandemic, high unemployment, because labor is struggling too, you know, when you have high unemployment, labor don't make money. So once you have these, when you see all these dynamics there, you really need somebody that has the type of talent that I think Ms. Moore has. If it doesn't work out, the people will come and speak in 2 years' time. The people will. But it is things like that you must give that leader room. And once they're using their influence and their political capital, they're able to get things done. It is when they're unable to influence a small group in like a constituency and branch, when they can't get that done, that is when you can start to say, well, that power is waning. And if they start to reflect from constituents, they write about it in the press, it will spread across nationally. So it is good to see that you have leaders that are willing to say it is not about overcoming the will of the people. It is using what you have, what the people have given you, to come back to them and to be honest, transparent, accountable. And once you do that, you are still within that threshold of allowing the democratic process to work. And that is why after the conversations, the persons wholeheartedly agreed and now are in full support of the Prime Minister's pick. You must have confidence in your leader, particularly when they have a vision for the country.
I'm just gonna say what one of your viewers said. Well said, George Brathwaite. That's from Jermaine. All right, a quick question here from Matthew Howell. Do you think bringing Tony Moore into the party? Ms. Motley would have more control in grooming her, in a sense, to try to get her agenda across as well? I hope that we interpret that correctly.
Well, based on my interpretation of it, I am assuming when they say Ms. Motley getting her agenda across, I am assuming the person means across to Labour. And that is one of the concerns that I have raised before. I know George is very familiar with this, but given the context of the last election and the overwhelming majority that government has, I am not sure that it is wise that you have a further consolidation of power, and that's what it is. And persons that deny that that is the case is interesting to me, because it's a very simple equation, you know. The same way that we can understand that a political, or rather a union, would act favorably towards a political party. In the same logic, a union can act unfavorably towards a political party. And that favorability or unfavorability will be determined based on the leader's biases. So if we have a circumstance where a head of a political party and a head of a union are of the same political persuasion, same party persuasion, we could see issues occurring regarding either favorability or unfavorability in the response to certain policies, and that is a fact. It is nothing unusual within our political context that you bring your political support with you. Whatever financial resources you have, whatever support you have behind you, you will bring that support with you to get or to further your political biases. It happens every day.
Political history has demonstrated to me that I would be a lot more worried about corporatism than I would be about labor. Indeed, the growth of the contemporary Caribbean and the political parties in this contemporary sense, labor is at the center. Indeed, right now as I speak, the PDP, it gets its volume from Caswell Franklin. Not Miss Drake's, the very intelligent young lady. I think she's very, very intelligent, very well spoken. Not from Bishop Atherley, who remains my friend, I would like to think. He's of a different, we have different political perspectives.
No.
It is not from them, it is from Caswell Franklin, who sees and projects himself as a voice of labor in this political dynamic. So I don't get worried about politics and labor being wrong, because in politics we also learn. A friend today can be an enemy in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting that George made mention of Caswell Franklin as the voice for labor and not Tony Moore. I wonder why. I'll leave it there.
I'm
I
speaking
think
in
he said
opposition.
for
It's
in
opposition.
opposition. He said he
It's
did say that
opposition.
in the PDP. That's what he
In
said.
the PDP.
It's
You just
opposition.
naughty.
That's a good one there, Brondo.
He just naughty. You have anything to add, Terry?
Nothing
I
much.
enjoyed it.
I guess nothing much beyond. So in the forthcoming week, we have Dr. Gonzalez could possibly win a 5th consecutive term in St. Vincent. We have the US elections coming up on Tuesday, and we have a lockdown in UK from Thursday. So we have a busy week. Any views on any of these three things happening in the forthcoming week?
And elections in Belize.
And, and also elections in
Yeah.
Belize. Any views?
Well, regarding St. Vincent, that will be a very interesting circumstance. I think that the favor is actually in Dr. Gonzalez, or on Dr. Gonzalez's end, given the trends of how people have voted during the COVID period. And when you look at the statistics and the polling and everything else previously, there are more seats on the margin for the opposition party than the current government. So it's very unlikely that he will find himself in problems electorally. I think he's going to win again. There are serious questions to be raised if he does, but it's very likely that he will win again if you ask me.
Fair enough. Dr. Brown?
Yes, I think Dr. Gonzalez will more than likely hold on, and I think he will again win with a relatively slender majority. Belize might be incumbent again as well. And certainly in terms of the United States, while I do not expect
The incumbent?
the Democrats to pull off a landslide based on the Electoral College and the rootedness of hard grind in the mill politics, I think that I do not think there is a real opening for Donald Trump to maintain. I think he shot himself, particularly in the last 2 months. I think he shot himself too often in the feet. And he has harmed his own chances. And particularly as, you know, we like to say God is a pigeon and he works in mysterious ways. Perhaps it is a bit mysterious that all over the world, the COVID is on the rise, and he didn't listen to the doctors, but apparently the doctors were absolute science is now being proven. And his ignoring science is the debacle. Works out to his detriment.
And I guess we're seeing the same thing in the UK now with Boris Johnson listening to the scientists and trying to clamp down on things before COVID runs away. Right, so I guess I'll leave it there. Ayo, you want to wrap up?
Yes, and we have some topics that we can discuss next week in addition to how this election turns out, this by-election turns out. This should be very interesting. Not sure if we're going to have a guest next week. I haven't quite decided if Terry and I will just come on and talk a bit about it, have a powwow, or we may just get a guest to come on or a couple to come on and debrief on everything, which may be more interesting too, because I don't think people want to listen to you all night, right? So let's see how it goes. All right, so I just want to thank you, Dr. Brathwaite, for coming on the show. Thank you, Devaron, for coming. I hope both of you will come again. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and it's quite obvious to me that the viewers also enjoyed it.
I don't know if I told you, but Devaron is very sharp.
Yes. Devaron and I were at university together, actually, so you can't tell me how sharp he is. I know.
And
he's an MPhil student now.
University. All right. So thank you.
So this was indeed a great discussion. Sorry, Terry, you're saying?
I was just telling them thank you for being here. Go ahead.
And I hope to have you both back at some point. Thank you to the viewers. Thank you for coming on today. Again, thank you for staying with us throughout. Most of you came and stayed, and I really appreciate that. I always say that you have choices. So when you stay with us, I am absolutely grateful. Thank you to those of you who shared, commented, and asked questions. And if anything else, I hope that this program develops an interest in politics. To those of you who think that this topic is stuffy, it really isn't. Politics is simply about all aspects of our lives, and we hope that we can really bring that across in these episodes, and bring out that concept in a way that everybody can understand why we should have a curiosity for political life in general. So keep sharing our page. Invite everyone that you know to join right here every Sunday at 5 p.m. To my co-host, Terry, I love you. Thanks you again for being here and the hard work that you continue to do to help to produce this program. I literally couldn't do it without you.
Oh, my, thank you. Thank you.
So, and again, I leave the final word with you.
Oh, thanks, Ayo. Thanks for that. I enjoy being here, and thank you again, Dr. Brathwaite. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks to the viewers. Of course, the show is for you, so we hope that you enjoyed it. So we'll be on next week. I think I'm due to travel, so I'm not sure how that will actually work, but we'll update you, I think, around Wednesday to let you know what's going on with the show, whether we have a guest or a guest host or what. Right, so we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Right, so thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time.